what if I told you? What if I told you that your conscious awareness is a powerful source of creative energy? Think about this. Think about this. Many of us have experienced being in the zone or in the flow when we're competing in the sport or we're working in a hobby. However, we often find that these moments are fleeting and they don't last. There's not a duration that occurs. My guest, Dr. Deborah Forrest, has scientific research that reveals this awareness is a gateway to the flow. This is a state of effortless productivity and the cosmic river of universal energy. Dr. Forrest is going to share her years of research in her new book, The Cosmic River, How Living in the Flow Can Transform Your Life Beyond Your Wildest Dreams. And this book is out today, October 10th. October 10th. So go to Amazon, order this book. It's a pre-sale, 99 cents. Get this book today. It will change your life. Now let's meet Dr. Forrest. Deborah Forrest is an MS, an MSN, a BSN, a scholar, an author, a speaker on spirituality, dementia, grief, and quantum energies. That alone is impressive. Her work blends shamanism, spirit, world connection, and the death and dying process with a career in nursing, biomedical research, bridging science and spirituality for personal transformation. Very few people can do this. Dr. Forrest, welcome to Life Altering Events.
Thank you, Frank. I'm happy to be here.
Now, Dr. Forrest, you have this massive scientific background and research and books, and scientists tend to be black and white. What inspired you to look into this quantum energy flow?
Well, it's interesting. My very first encounter, am I talking?
You're fine.
Okay, I thought I got a bit of feedback. Anyway, my first encounter with the flow of this cosmic energy that we're talking about began in the early 1990s when I was doing my doctoral dissertation research with Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's final grief groups.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of many weeks, I was analyzing the data that I had collected from that research study, and I got overwhelmed. That's all I can say is it was just unbelievable, the amount of complex, complicated grief responses that some of these people were subjected to. For example, one lady literally watched her 3 children burn in a fire.
Oh, God.
And she was able to work her way through. I met her early on and then worked with her for 2 or 3 years. And she received some measure of peace in the process of that. But that's an example of the level of traumatic grief that I was exposed to. And I found myself one day just overwhelmed, and suddenly, to my shock and surprise, I was it felt like, and in my mind's eye, it was like I was riding around in my office on an Arabian carpet. And I was just floating above the floor and above the research materials that were all spread out everywhere. And that continued. And I got some sense of relief of being lifted up and away and out of that traumatic energy, information and energy. And I was then settled back down into my office, and I was able to continue the data analysis. I completed my doctoral dissertation, defended it, and went on to do a fellowship in aging at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. And when I got to Lexington, that sense of floating around on a magic carpet ceased. My access to the flow was, to me, it was shut off because I was in a different environment. The focus was on elderly people with dementia and doing assessments. I did not experience that energy or that energetic encounter with this flow energy until I moved to England 2018. And I was on a holiday up in the north of England with a friend of mine. And during that trip, Lynn Fry of the Eagles passed away. And both my friend and I were avid fans of the Eagles. And on the journey back to toward London, where we lived, we were talking about what the implications would be when would the Eagles go forward, or how would Mr. Frey's death impact the Eagles? And for some reason I can't explain, I reached over and turned on the car radio, because that was a fairly heavy subject we were talking about. And to my absolute shock and surprise, the BBC Two was playing a tribute to the Eagles in honor of Glenn Frey. He had passed away like 3 days before. And for some reason, to me, it was shocking that we had just been talking about him. We had just been exploring what might happen. And here the BBC Two was playing this tribute. And I turned to my friend and I said, what is the statistical probability of something like that happening? And he just looked at me in his smug kind of engineering face and said, that's the flow at work. So what are you talking about? He said, that's the flow. When you speak words, they create a ripple effect in the universe and things happen. Well, I accepted that. He was a learned man, and we got back home, and I was piqued because I had had that experience with the Kubler-Ross research experience of riding around on a carpet. And here we were riding in a car down the road, and I'm being told that I'm experiencing the flow. Well, I did some of my own research after that, and I started journaling when I became aware of this energetic flow as I had before. I started writing things down, writing experiences down, and I could watch within a few hours to a couple of days it got down to 5 minutes. I could think about something, I could speak it into the universe, and it would appear. And I, by then, was convinced that there was something to this, and it wasn't just my imagination. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't hallucinating. There was something scientifically attached to that. Well, needless to say, in my research background, I thought, there's something to this, and I need to understand it better. So I started doing research, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago. And I discovered, because I have the PhD in clinical psychology, I was familiar with the positive psychology approach to the flow and the work that had been done extensively with athletes, and then later with corporate executives, getting them to use the flow to step into the zone to enhance their performance. But this was something different. This was tapping into an energy that's available to all of us, and it did not require that hardcore, shut everything else out in the world, shut everything out of your life, but just focus on this one thing. And there are athletes in my family, so I'm quite familiar with what they have to do to accomplish that. But the research that I was led to, for lack of a better description, proved to me and showed me that there was something to this unseen energy, this quantum energy, that was real. And even back then, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about quantum energy. It wasn't until Deepak Chopra came out with his quantum body and some of his books on quantum energy as it relates to his work in medicine that I began to see an avenue for moving forward with my own research. And during the course of the research, I interviewed 5 people, which I'll talk about a little bit later, who had their own experiences with how the flow transformed their lives. And one of those is a fellow by the name of Tony. Tony and I were talking a lot right up until it was about time to put the pen to paper and write this book. And he and I together came up with the label Cosmic River to give a name to this energy that we were experiencing. And the research that I had done up to that point led to my experiences of the flow of energy that comes from the cosmic river, as Tony calls it. And again, as I said once, and I'll say it again, probably many times, there's a scientific foundation for this information that I share in this book. There's a lot of personal experience, there's a lot of experience of the other people, and there's a lot of research because I am a researcher by training. And it's important to me to share information with readers and audiences that has a sound scientific basis for it. That's just my thing. Now, I will say, because one of the questions that I often get is, how does this cosmic river fit into the everyday world? Cosmic river, they want to know what the cosmic river is.
Exactly.
And I'll read, without going into great detail, I'll just read you what's in the book. The cosmic river reveals a consistent stream of benevolent energy. Remember that it's a benevolent energy within the quantum universe that's available to everyone. Connecting to this energy can radically change, improve, and alter your life and the relationships that you have to other people, to your work, to your environment. And it's a relationship between the human spirit, consciousness, plasma, which I'll talk about later. And plasma is referred to as this intelligent glue of the universe, but I'll again discuss that in a few minutes. And this quantum power that's available to us. I use, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I used 5 stories of 5 different people from vastly different backgrounds. And I shared their stories of how they became aware of the flow of this unseen energy. And they were all willing to allow it to carry them to new places. And invariably, every single one of them said to me, it transformed their lives above and beyond anything they could have possibly imagined. That's when they said that, I knew that I was onto something. This book, I will say to you and to the readers, also includes simple practices for the reader to learn how to harness their own awareness and their own energies from the quantum realm to transform their own lives. So that's
It's
it in a
quite a
nutshell.
story. That is quite a story. Now, you mentioned plasma. Now, for the layperson, we have no idea what plasma is. Can you explain it? Just what does it mean for a layperson, this plasma?
Plasma is a fairly new term that's coming into the field of science. And unless you're a quantum physicist, an astrophysicist, an astrologer, astronomer more so than an astrologer, you'll become more familiar with plasma. I was led to a book put out by Professor Robert Temple, who's an independent scholar in England. He's also a science writer, and he's an author of several thought-provoking books that have been translated into 44 different languages. And his passion is for plasma and plasma research. He did a tremendous job of including all of the up-to-date research that's been done on plasma by all of the physicists, astrophysicists around the world. And a lot of the challenges that they ran into trying to communicate to the larger scientific community what their findings were. He put this material together in a book he labeled The New Science of Heaven, how the science of plasma will transform humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. Now, in short, he defines plasma as the 4th state of matter. Now, before anybody starts having flashbacks to high school physics or chemistry, settle down. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to simply say that the other 3 states of matter are gas, liquids, and solids. And this plasma, they emerge out of this plasma. Professor Temple points out in his book that astronomers and astrophysicists agree to one fact, and that is that the universe is composed of 99.9% plasma and not atoms, as we've been taught in the past. He goes on to say, he goes on to say that this plasma is a form of matter that's made up of particles and ions. In short, it's composed of a mixture of positively charged materials and negatively charged materials. I'm not going to get much more complicated than that. His description of plasma universe provides the best explanation that we have for this goo of unseen energies that hold the greater universe together. And this goo extends beyond our Earth, beyond our galaxy, beyond all of the galaxies in the universe. It's a goo that holds everything together. And he goes on to declare, which I was shocked when I read it. He says plasma can be intelligent and it has a conscience. Well, that was a revelation for me, having been a scientific reader, and I try to keep up with the trends in science for the last 20 or 30 years. His reference, though, interestingly, fit together with Dr. Penny Kelly, who is a researcher a consciousness researcher, which I'll mention her in a little bit. I used her research when I started talking about consciousness because she provided the most concrete, comprehensive description of what consciousness is and how it's formed. But I'll again discuss that in a minute. She does say, as Professor Temple says, that consciousness is real, that the plasma is real, and that the plasma and consciousness are intelligent and they have an ability to communicate together. Now, beyond that, I'm not going to go any further because we are right on the edge, the cutting edge of where the research in quantum physics and quantum consciousness, because there are some people now saying consciousness is a quantum entity as well. But we're right on the edge of that. So we really can't go any further until there's more research done. But it's a phenomenon that we're all incorporated in, engulfed by, and surrounded by. These unseen energies are around us. You're sitting in it right now as you watch and listen to me talk. You'll have to read the book to get more detail if you want to go there, because that's the sum total of what I'm going to talk about the plasma. It's complex, but one of the things that I tried to work hard on is providing a language that's easy to understand in this book for people who are not scientists, who have no interest in science, but they want to know, how does all of this happen? There are foundations for what I'm talking about. And all of it centers around unseen energy. People don't, when I started writing this book 4 years ago, I tried to come up with some analogies, and probably one of the closest that I came to was the wind. Now, the Southeast United States has experienced the winds, yes, and the powerful winds over the last 2 or 3 days, and the destruction that it can bring. I'm talking about an unseen energy that is manageable and is not destructive. I want to make that difference. But we don't see the wind, but we know that it exists. We don't see electricity, but we know it. We can turn on light bulbs with electricity. Plasma is real. Consciousness is real. We're just beginning to understand how they fit into this grand scheme of things. And on that, I'll stop about plasma.
Outstanding. Now, you often mention, and I've read, I was given an advanced copy of the book. It's spectacular. You have to get this book. But Dr. Forrest, you speak about intentions versus expectations. What's the difference?
Yes. Simply put, intentions are the vehicle that we as humans use to tap into unseen energies, the unseen energies that I'm talking about. But before the intentions can be used, you need to develop an awareness that there are these unseen energies around, and that we are living in them. And once you become aware of that, and there are tools in this book toward the end of the book that I've included that help you to understand, identify your own sense of awareness about these energies in your own life. They're very very focused and very personal. But once you become aware that these unseen energies do exist, and you have the ability and tools to tap into them, it is the intentions that you use. The intentions become the vehicle for directing your journey into the unseen energies and through the unseen energies. I will say this, the book also includes some research done by the late Dr. William Tiller. Dr. Temple did plasma, Dr. Tiller did the energy of intentions. And he proved through multiple quantifiable studies that there's an energetic electrical, I say electrical because that's a term that I think people can relate to. There's an electrical energetic component found within the energy of one's intentions within their own brain and body. Mm-hmm. You'll have to again read the book to understand a little bit more of that. But suffice it to say, the intentions are an open and flexible approach to one's journey into these unseen energies. Conversely, the expectations put a limit, and they put a pressure on the outcome of one's journey into these unseen energies. If you have expectations, you set limits on what you're asking for or what you're looking for. And if you don't get what you're looking for or what you expect, then that has an impact on yourself. One of the things Dr. Tiller did point out, because some of his students said, well, how long does it take to get the energy of the intentions realized? I will tell you that he said it's an undetermined amount of time. As I mentioned to you earlier, when I started making recordings or listening, I kept a journal of my experiences in the flow and around the flow. And as I said earlier, sometimes it would take 2 days, sometimes it would take a few hours, and the fastest was 5 minutes. Now, there's one story, I won't go into detail, but one of the people whose story is one of the 5 stories includes a fellow who was in Chicago. He saw something he wanted for his own life. He went back to his hotel room. He wrote in his personal journey what his intentions were regarding that particular issue. And it had to do with a relationship, the type of relationship he wanted for himself going forward. It took 1 year, but that intention was realized a year later. And the quality of his life changed tremendously. And his story is quite fascinating as well. Mm-hmm. But again, I will say this, by setting a clear intention for our journey into the world of the unseen energies, we create an open space for that journey that will unfold in its own way, in its own time. And people have to begin to learn to understand that and accept that it will happen, but it will happen in its own time. And the intention is an intention is characterized by 3 things: the clarity of the purpose behind the intention, the positive energy that's incorporated in the intention, and one's personal responsibility for the outcome. Because you may not get what you want, you may get what you need. And you have to learn how to work with that, as I say.
That's great.
But it is what it is, but it is true. And intentions do work. But they're powerful. They are very powerful. Dr. Tiller's, I won't go into beyond saying that Dr. Tiller proved that it has an electrical energetic power to it. And it's quite phenomenal, the degree to which that energy could literally take out a large section of one's environment. I'll put it like that. It's
Wow.
quite powerful.
But sure.
It makes for it's an interesting reading section.
It was. I saw the intentions versus expectations, because growing up, most of us have been told set
Mhm.
expectations.
Right,
And I didn't realize until I read your book that it's that's the limiting factor. So
right,
you've put a ceiling
right,
on what can happen. It's
right.
incredible. Folks, you have to get this book. I'm telling you, go order it now.
But these unseen energies are extremely powerful. And once you begin to understand that and you allow those energies to flow within your life and your experiences, all I can say is that your life will be transformed in ways you never expected. And that's one of the driving forces that kept me going on this book, because there was more than one time that I wanted to put it down and walk away. But the greater universe said, no, 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 this is your job. You're going to do this. And so I did. And they began, the universe, and I say this because it's the only way I can say it, the universe began to send me the material that ended up in this book. But it took a while. So
Yeah,
it comes when it's supposed to come,
it comes when the time is right.
when the
Now,
time is right.
one of the things I've heard you say, Dr. Forrest, is something called the I am state. Okay, what is that?
Okay. If you were alive in the 1970s, in the hippie era, the 60s and the 70s,
Yes,
you
I
heard a
was.
lot of people talk about the I am state. Well, I was alive during those days. I was adult during those days, and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It was like I was raised in a religious background that was not really tolerant of that concept. And so I pushed it aside like other people did. And it wasn't until I started working on this book and doing the research that I needed to do, especially in the field of consciousness, because I have researched many, many different people's descriptions of what consciousness is, and they were all very elusive. And it wasn't until I ran into the consciousness research that was done by Penny Kelly, Dr. Penny Kelly, that I began to understand what she meant. And I'm just going to read what she wrote because it's the simplest way. She said, the I am state is when one, it can be described like this: when one travels to the, if you can visualize this in your own mind as I read this, then it will help. If you can begin to imagine traveling to the far reaches of the universe, beyond Earth, beyond the galaxies that we know about, beyond all of the galaxies of the universe, into this empty space that's filled with nothing. There's no sound, there's no light, there's no movement, there is no motion whatsoever. I had one of these experiences, so I began to understand what she was saying. It is real. You are, when you get to that place, you are in what she calls this awareness of an I am state. There is no self. There is this nothingness except an awareness that the person exists. This awareness that I was in this empty space was, it was shocking, it was powerful. It was a recognition that I am an entity of this greater creator of the universe. And she says this I am state, this awareness of this I am state, is the basic grounds for us as beings, human beings. She described it as pure bliss. I describe it as pure bliss. It is like nothing you've ever experienced or will ever experience. Again, there is no self. It's just the basic energetic, this unseen energetic existence of us as entities within this larger universe. And that's as much as I'm going to say about that, because it's one that you really need to sit and read through her description of how, once you begin to understand that we are this I am existence, she does a very good job of describing how everything evolves and unfolds in our universe, the one that we know, that creates trees and earth and fish and those kinds of things besides humans. And it's quite interesting to read. But I am is real, and it's a part of this unseen energy that is who we are as entities.
Well, that's very interesting because I also was around in the 60s and 70s, and I spent time in San Francisco up by Haight-Ashbury.
Uh-huh.
And uh, we there was this field, right? And you were there, but we were all considered weird. And
Yeah,
it was the woo-woo theory, the woo
yeah, it was
approach.
woo.
Yeah, now you're a renowned scientist. You have expertise in laser treatment and dementia. You're an accomplished scientific author and speaker. And yet you went into this area that up until recently has been considered, you people are a little weird out there, right? So does the science start to bring credibility? That's what I think I'm seeing. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was a left brain hardcore scientific researcher back in the 80s. I'd finished my master's degree at Penn State, and I was involved in some original cutting edge research on the use of biomedical lasers in operating rooms. That's where I got my original, my original introduction into these unseen energies. I learned the physics of biomedical lasers because I was teaching surgeons how to use the biomedical lasers, but they needed to understand the physics behind the process.
Mm-hmm.
And a short version of that piece of information was that I learned how the unseen energy of laser light is harnessed and focused down through either a gaseous agent or a crystal, and in doing that, you create a specific type of a laser beam that's used to treat different types of human illnesses. And that was fine for me for as long as I worked in that field. I'm I moved on when in graduate school, in my PhD graduate school program a few years later. I started doing work, as I mentioned earlier, with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's complex, complicated grief situations. And they informed me and my understanding of more unseen energies and what the level of trauma can do to one's entire being. And at the time, I was working in a dementia unit. It's interesting to me how all of these things begin to come together. But I worked with a group of Native American nurses who taught me about the unseen energies of the human spirit that are still present in people with dementia. And it took me a couple of years to even begin to wrap my head around that piece of information. But I was able to finally understand it. And it resulted in a book that I published in 2000 about how to, and another one in 2013, about how the unseen energies of the human soul, the human spirit, are still present in people with different types of dementia and different types of neurodegenerative diseases, and how one can tap into those unseen energies and stay connected to the person with that type of dementia or physical decline. And it was the collection of both of those sets of energy, both of those sets of research into these scientifically proven fields of research that address these unseen energies, but they were labeled a little bit differently. But
Mm-hmm.
they formed a basis for me to say, there's something to this. There's something way beyond the woo-woo. Because I will inject this real quickly into this story. When I was doing some of the grief studies, one of the sections I had to read was about apparitions. And
Mm-hmm.
when I was in the dementia center in Kentucky doing dementia assessments, a lot of the family members talked to me about, they wanted to know if their loved one was usually with Alzheimer's, were they seeing somebody from the other side? Were they seeing an apparition, or were they delusional? And in the course of that research and that study and working with those people, I learned that the research has documented for well over 400 years the presence of apparitions associated with people in death and dying. So it's very real, and it's not woo-woo. And it's when I began to tell people, that some of this was real, and if you work around people with dementia long enough, you begin to understand there's a contextual difference between somebody who's seeing an apparition, especially when they're close to death, and somebody who's full-blown hallucinating. There's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But those, oddly enough, those together with my shaman training in England provided me with a basis for looking at these unseen energies and this cosmic river and the flow of energies that was transforming lives, and that has transformed my life as well. And it all sort of funneled down into this book that's coming out today. So
Exactly.
there you go.
Exactly. One of the things that's intriguing audience members and people around the world who are watching this is you read this book and there's the science, and she lays it out in great depth, and it's proven. You can go find it. You can look it up if you want. But then Dr. Forrest then takes it into real examples of real people. And I was a military medic during the Vietnam War, and this aberration thing just sort of sparked it, because as young people were on death's door about to die, they were having visions and discussions with a parent, with someone from, and doctors would say, the medical doctors would say, oh, they're hallucinating. The psychiatrists would say, no, they're not.
Right.
They're not. And I saw that many, many times over and over again. And in the book, the stories that you share, I don't want you to give away the farm here, but of people that very, the beauty is they're very, very different feels, different everything.
Mm-hmm.
And stepping into this flow, or learning how to step into this flow. Now you talk about an invitation. What is and you explain a little bit. Don't go into a lot of depth on it, but what is this invitation?
I'll share with you one of the stories, a snippet of one of the stories that's in this book. And I mentioned earlier that a fellow by the name of Tony's really the one who came up with the Cosmic River title for the book. Mm-hmm. He said, it's a cosmic river. You know it, I know it. And that's what the book needs to be called. It needs a subtitle. Tony was a book editor. He owned a book company in addition to other things. But when I met him, he was living in California, and he sat down one day and told me some of his life story. Now, I had known Tony for 10 plus years. He had helped me with some of the issues regarding my very first 2 book publications. And he sat down, and he just, for reasons I'll never understand, he began to share his life story. I knew he had been reared in Indiana. He went to law school, moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and was a criminal law attorney. And he joined a very prestigious firm in Grand Rapids. I don't know the name of it, but that's beside the point. He told me that he was a very young trial lawyer, and one of the gifts of that experience was that he worked with a collection of World War II veterans who took him under their wing, talking about military. They took him under their wing. He lost his very first criminal trial, and they sat him down afterwards and said, Tony, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? And he told them, and they literally taught him how to win how to win criminal law cases. And he said he never lost another one after that. Those gentlemen stayed with him. They had a camaraderie that they had developed as World War II veterans. They shared with him pearls of wisdom that they had acquired in their own life as vets and also as criminal law attorneys. And he took those to heart. He learned from them how to create win-win situations. Well, after 10 years of being a successful criminal law attorney, one of his friends came to him and said, "Hey, Tony, with your business acumen and my creativity, we could move to Hollywood and write TV shows." Well, that was a simple invitation that Tony got. And he was a very striking man. And he said, "I took a few days and I thought about it. He'd won the custody of his two children from a divorce earlier. And he said, I think I'm going to take him up on this invitation." And he went back to his friend and said, "Yes, I think we should do this. It's time for a change for me." And he says, "I packed up my kids and the dogs and the furniture, and we moved to California." Moved to California, set up a home in, I think it was Malibu. His friend came out. They literally wrote and produced the very first variety TV show. It had to have been in the 60s, early 70s, with Roy Clark and a group of very prominent country music stars.
Mhm.
And his career in Hollywood and the media industry took off. He never looked back. He had a very good business acumen, which was something that he used that the different studios really enjoyed and really appreciated. And his career changed tremendously. As he said, I began to do things I never could have imagined. He traveled the world with his children, and he worked for a variety of different studios. He worked for very, very prominent, high-level A-list Hollywood stars over the years. The only one that I can speak to and remember is he was the financial manager for the TV show In the Heat of the Night with Carol.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
O'Connor, Carol
Carol
O'Connor.
O'Connor. Carol O'Connor turned out to be one of his best friends.
Wow.
And by the time that I met Tony, he had retired from all of it. He had retired from his work with the studios. He had purchased a book publishing company for a couple of years and then built that up and sold it. And he was doing consulting work for an orthopedic surgeon in Santa Monica. And he was working with select people on their projects because of his notoriety and his acumen. He said, "Deborah, as a criminal trial attorney in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I could never have ever imagined the life that I have lived. And I get to meet people like you, and I get to teach you about how to create win-win situations." And that's the sum total of what I'll share with you about Tony's story. It goes on
It
from
does.
there.
It
But
does. It's
he
amazing.
accepted the invitation was very straightforward. And it led him to places that he never expected to go. Each of the other people's stories that are shared in this book had different types of invitations. And I will share with you one quick note, and then I'll stop on this topic. I thought I had had enough invitations to get me through to this book completion. But no. I I had already pulled together some of the original drafts of the book. And I met with my editor in February of this year in Nashville, thinking, okay, I'm going to meet with this lady. I'll have an hour-long conversation with her. We'll discuss what needs to be done, and I'll go about my way. No. My editor said, "Deborah, I've read what you've sent me. You need to put more of yourself into this book." No. This is about other people and it's about science, and I'm just kind of the storyteller. No. You need to put more of yourself in this book. And she discussed some of the specifics that I needed to incorporate, that I talked with her about those topics in what started out as a 1-hour conversation, ended up with a 3-hour conversation. And I got back to my hotel and it suddenly struck me. I have been given another invitation to step into a deeper level of the flow than I was even thinking about or even writing about. And that took this manuscript and ultimately the book that you're going to read when you buy it into a whole different arena that was quite rewarding. And
It's an
the
amazing
invitations,
story.
the invitations come, and they come in different forms.
And I know that editor very well, and
Yes.
I could see that conversation occurring. Well, Dr. Forrest, I had the honor to read this early release, and folks, this is an eye-opening book. It's a game changer. But we're almost out of time. So, what last words? What last words do you want to leave with the listeners around the world?
Everyone has access to the flow of the cosmic river. Everyone. For those who choose to access that energy, there is an opportunity available to you to literally transform your life into things and places and ways that you could not even imagine. You have the power to do that. And I hope you take advantage of it. Thank
So, how
you.
can people get a hold of you? How can people reach you? Because you're going to be bombarded with requests here.
I have a website. It's www.doctor/ or Deborah-Forrest.com. And if you could post that somewhere,
Yeah, it'll be up there.
I would
When it goes
appreciate
live,
it.
people will be able to see it.
Okay. There is
Now, as I,
there's a
go ahead.
section on the website where they can send me emails directly and
Perfect.
communicate with me directly.
Excellent. As I said, we're just about out of time. I want to thank again Dr. Deborah Forrest for sharing these years of wisdom and research to show the world that we all have this ability to step into the cosmic river of energy. The book, once again, Cosmic River, How Living in the Flow Can Transform Your Life Beyond Your Wildest Imaginations, available right now. Go to Amazon, get it. It will change your life. Now, you can see this show on my podcast, which is called Life Altering Events. It's on my YouTube channel, which is called Frank Sakari, and it'll be on Parade Deck. I also send links to Dr. Forrest, and she posted in her world. If you use my YouTube channel, please subscribe. Let me leave you with this. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Dr. Forrest showed us where many of those rocks are. Join us again next week for another life-altering event, and go order this book today. Thank you again, Dr. Forrest.
Thank you.